Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Film Nerd Podcast. I'm Vince, and once again, I am joined by the washed-up athletes, Kory Schrauben, James Edgett, Zac Hess, are all back to discuss yet another movie stemming from our original video on classics we are embarrassed we haven't seen the first time around. A month and a half ago. We played the game. James won. James selected 2006 Babel. We discussed that one a while ago. A few weeks ago, we discussed Kory's pick, the also 2006 film, Children of Men. And now Zac Hess. Zac has selected our third and final film from the game. And he picked 2007, There Will Be Blood, written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, which we'll get into in just a moment here. Hopefully we can do a different episode in the future and get in some older films, as all three of these films were very close in terms of the release date. But before we get started, gentlemen, how we doing? Kory, how you doing? Kory just got back from South Carolina, right? Laying on the beach for a week.
North Carolina. But
North Carolina.
I am great. Not happy to be back because the weather there was pretty amazing, but we have grass now, so it's good news.
As long as the rain stays away, it's not too bad right now. Yep. James, how about you? You've been awfully quiet, stoic since we started.
Isn't that my normal state of being?
Usually you're a little bit more chipper.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, just living life.
Just contemplating life, lamenting life. Zach, how you doing there with your M22 fish shirt?
Hanging in there. Doing all right. Living the dad life.
And everyone's got their beverage, ready to talk about a great movie here and have a great conversation. So, again, let me introduce this film we're talking about, 2007, American epic period drama film, written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. There Will Be Blood, selected by Zac, loosely based on a novel from 1927 called Oil by Upton Sinclair. A lot of people know Upton Sinclair's novel, The Jungle.
Great novel.
Another I know Zac said he read it. I've never had a chance to read it, but I've always read about it and heard about it. There Will Be Blood stars Daniel Day-Lewis as Daniel Plainview, who early in the film, we'll get into in a little bit here, he kind of starts off as a silver miner, and it doesn't last long as he discovers oil. And basically, this is like a modern American epic, rise to capitalism, corporate empire, monopolizing the oil industry, which obviously is very famous around that time, late 1800s, early 1900s, Southern California's oil boom. Paul Dano is really good in a supporting role in this too, and this is often lauded and talked about as one of the greatest films of the 21st century. I was the only one of the group that had seen it. I remember the trailers for this. I don't know about you guys. So this came out, what part of the year in 2007? Came out in December, so we were 15, and I remember the trailer, because the one thing that I remember from the trailer, and you guys will know it now because you've watched the movie, is the scene where he's on his knees and he's screaming, "I've abandoned my child!" I remember that from the trailer, and I don't know, that always stuck in my head when I saw the trailer on TV, and I was like, I got to see this movie, and I just thought it looked so good, and I didn't see it in theaters. I remember renting this one and being pretty enamored with it, even at 15, 16, whenever I rented it. But I have a personal story before I ask you guys what you thought of it. If my roommates from college listen to this, Kyle Johnson, David Galganitis, I don't know if they listen or not. I Snapchatted them that I was watching this movie last night to do this podcast. And funny story, my freshman year of college, I had not nearly as big a movie collection as behind me now, but I had probably a good 100 in some crates, and guys that were on my football team would always come in and borrow movies from me. One time, Kyle and Dave came into my room, and I wasn't there. I think I was either in class or I was at the library or something, but they grabbed There Will Be Blood. They were looking for a horror movie. They were looking for a scary movie, and they saw the title There Will Be Blood, knew nothing about it, didn't read about it, didn't look anything up, thought they were going to watch a horror movie, and then sat through a 2.5-hour epic historical drama film, and were so pissed at me. And they always give me shit about this movie, and I'm like, you guys picked it out. I could have told you it wasn't a horror movie, that the title is completely symbolic. Like, it has, there really isn't, we'll get into it, there's not really that much blood in the movie. There's a few really violent scenes, but they're very brief. So before we really get in, do some
surprised you
discussion
didn't
here.
I'm surprised you didn't have your films organized by genre or something. That would have been better. That's
On
what I
his
would have
bookshelf.
They were
that we had to build.
alphabetical. They're always alphabetical.
Well, that doesn't help you when you're picking out a film. Other
Well, it
than
would help if you
finding
just
it.
asked me. You don't defend them. They were assholes about it.
Just
Kory,
saying.
what did you think about this movie? What were your thoughts? Did you know anything going in? What were your like expectations? Did you know anything about this movie outside of the conversation when we picked the film? Did you know anything?
No,
about it?
so I actually read up on it, just read like a little blurb on it. So I had an idea of what it was about.
Before you watched it, you did?
Yeah, but good movie. I thought it was pretty solid. Maddie did not like it. That original scene where the guy's brains get smashed in, she pretty much checked out after that and goes, "Why do we have to watch one of these stupid movies Vince picks?"
I didn't
And I
pick
said-
it. You
I know,
told
I
me
said-
that. I'm like,
well, no,
I
I just said, well, we got to watch it. So we watched it. Pretty solid. Really good acting on the main actor's part, Daniel. And then, yeah, I mean,
Daniel.
the rest is history. Daniel.
James, I know you don't like it. So what are your thoughts? Did you know anything about it going into it? Did you read anything about it? What do you think?
No, I had no knowledge of the movie before getting into it. But
Okay, you didn't look anything up either.
No,
You just went in
no, other
blind?
than what you had told us. But I found this movie extremely boring, too long,
Ooh.
hard to get into, not entertaining. To be honest, I felt like it was pointless. I got done with that movie. I'm like, that was dumb. I did not enjoy it at all.
Next
Worse
time we
than
get
Babel?
together-
No, Babel was worse, but this was a close second.
Zach,
Next
how
time
about
we get
you?
next time we get together, Jimmy, while the adults go watch a movie, we'll put on Despicable Me 2 in the other room for you, and you can go watch that.
What
No,
an
stick me with a Pixar movie or
Hey.
Marvel, and I'll be happy.
Nothing wrong with Pixar or Marvel.
No, and I guess I'll let Zach go, and then I'll address Jimmy a little bit more. But Zach, did you know anything about it, or did you look up anything about it other than before for the game?
I just knew a little bit about it from talking to you guys, and from I've seen the trailers and stuff. I knew it was kind of a period piece. Didn't really know what to expect. I really enjoyed it. I really like period pieces like that era. Sorry, like the early 1900s, late 1800s.
Yep.
So I knew I would like that part of it. It's always kind of interesting because it's kind of like recent history, right? Where it's far enough away where it feels like a whole different world, but it's close enough like where our great grandparents were alive for some of that movie. Like, it's just kind of weird to think about. But no, I really enjoyed it. I thought the acting was phenomenal between Paul Dano and Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, I knew Daniel Day-Lewis was great, but it was very intense. I knew you mentioned this to me, I think, before, Vince, but the music was really good.
I love
it.
I hated the music.
See, and that's the point, though. Like, we were sitting there, and Rachel was watching with me too, and she's like, "Oh my god, this music is terrible." I'm like, "That's the point. It's supposed to make you feel like on edge and like uncomfortable."
What's the word? It starts with a D.
Dissonant.
Yeah, it's like very off-putting, and
Very
it's supposed to be
dissonant
like representative of the chaos.
It was annoying.
It was,
Oh,
but
I
I
love
think
it.
like that was
I love
the
it.
point, and it gets under your skin, and I thought it was good. I really enjoyed it.
So I have a few things I kind of want to break down. I would like to address everything you guys said, especially some of the things Zach said, but we'll kind of get to them one by one here. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies. I completely get Jimmy or like Kory. I completely understand Maddie not liking it. I think if you are someone who's just not into like a period piece, like epic drama film, because it's look at the guy, you got Forrest. Forrest is like, ooh, I want to be in the conversation. So
Forrest's opinion of the movie.
He doesn't like violence.
Doesn't like violence. If you don't like these kinds of movies, like an epic period historical drama film, it's just right away it's not going to be for you. And for me personally, it just depends on what it is, because there are some period pieces that I just think are boring. I can appreciate what they're going for, but for me it's very hit or miss. I feel like I either love them or I'm just very indifferent, whereas this one, I think for me personally, it hits everything that I want from a movie. Some of the things Zach mentioned, I love the super bizarre music. I love that Johnny Greenwood, who's a member of Radiohead, so one of it's the lead guitarist from Radiohead, made the music for this film, and he uses a lot of very bizarre instrumentation. And like the scene, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, it might be one of my favorite scenes in any movie ever, when they hit the gas, the like gas in the, I was reading up on it. Apparently it's like a phenomenon when you're drilling in oil, you can hit a gas pocket. Apparently now in modern oil drilling, they have like some safety thing built in to prevent what happened in the movie. But back then, if you hit the gas, like it just went up in flames.
Yeah,
like
they were drilling with 2x4s and had like fire.
How crazy is it though? This is like recent history. This is 120 years ago, like 130 years ago. We were just finding crude oil.
Yeah, the oil boom. Yeah, it was.
How about everybody? Sorry, Dave. I'm going to go on a tangent.
No,
how about they were just pumping oil and digging a hole and leaving it there? Like now, you can't throw a candy wrapper on the ground. Yet we were just leaving piles of oil.
Lake.
Just
at one point, there's
out.
Like a huge lake of oil that they're using a pipeline, just dumping it into this giant on the ground reservoir. It's like a pond of oil. It was just
crazy. Like what?
But you gotta
can't
think
even spit without people freaking out. And now they had just said like ponds. Jesus Christ, Cat.
You got to think at that time with the industrialization of like the modern world, especially the United States, like everything's new. Like everything.
Yeah, they had no idea.
There's literally no standards, no regulations, no restrictions. There's
standard oil.
Standard oil. There's no blueprint for this. You know what I mean? So it's like they're just coming up with, and I love how you see that progression. I mean, that's part of what makes this an epic film. Is it takes place over 30 years. I mean, you know, we have the initial opening in 1898, then it goes to 1902, you see 1911, and then 1927, and you see the progression of how they kind of drill, like the early scene when he's going for silver and he's all alone, and he injures his leg because it's just not set up very well, and even when we see the scene where everything goes up in flames, I mean, that's more sophisticated than what you see at the beginning. So then you think 100 years later, how much time has gone by. But I think one of my favorite parts about this movie as a whole is that it's this precursor for modern America. Like, and I've read some reviews where people were like, this movie basically shows religion and modern capitalism, like corporate empire, like butting head to head. And that's like America in a sense, right? Like modern America, like two of the biggest controlling powers, whether they're always present or not, is religion, right? And corporations, right? Capitalism. Someone said that, like, I was reading some critic's review, he was like, by the end of this movie, you can see where the blueprint for hundreds of Walmarts being across America was set by the end of this movie, because it is kind of just this rise of a tycoon and that greed, that corporate, you know, rise to power. And that's why I love, even though this movie's so, you know, it takes place a long time ago, you can see where by the time this movie ends, where America is going, both with religion and capitalism. But getting kind of back down, shrinking down to some more individual things I want to talk about, that, you know, is a more broad topic. Some of the other things I really enjoy about this movie, and I guess you guys feel free to jump in. I like that this movie doesn't have much exposition. There's actually, I checked, because I've seen this movie now, I think 4 or 5 times. I forgot the first 14 minutes, there's not a line of dialogue.
I love that.
I think the word no is uttered when he breaks his leg. He falls and goes, no! Like he wakes up and he's like completely upset. That's it. For the first 14 minutes, other than the word no, there's like no dialogue. It's all visual.
Thanks to you, I watch movies with subtitles now, and I can attest to that, because there was no language on the screen until, like you said, 14 minutes in. I thought that was really cool, though. I mean, when you're able to convey, like, when you're able to tell a story without saying words, purposefully, and just using the sounds around you and the scenery and the music. I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, you could totally feel his struggle at the beginning when he's like digging for silver, and he gets like this little thing of silver and breaks his leg and like crawls out of a mine and goes to the stones, but whatever the place to get it.
Yeah, he was obviously.
And it was like $1.
Yeah, it was like this. Yeah, exactly.
Well, he was obviously, you know, working at that time. Again, there's, and I appreciate this about Paul Thomas Anderson in all of his movies. I don't know how many of his films you guys have seen, but in this one in particular, he kind of leaves it up to you to kind of put some pieces and some gaps together. He doesn't really explain a lot, which I like. I like movies that just don't explain everything. They let you kind of put the pieces together, so you can kind of assume that at that time he's kind of like maybe an independent contractor, and he's working nearby for like whoever he's contracted with, and that's what, you know, whoever comes and gets him and saves him after he, you know, pulls himself up by the rope up the ladder. but then I like how it jumps forward, I think 4 years to 1902, and after they've discovered oil. And one of the most chilling moments that if you don't pay attention, you might miss it, and then you might not realize what happened again until the end of the movie. Is his child is that other guy's kid,
right?
And if you're not paying attention, you might miss it. I mean, it's very quick. It's, again, they don't explain anything or really tell you much. If you're watching, you see that the guy that he's working with is holding, that's his son, right? And then he gets killed. Is that the scene that upset Maddie, or was it the other one?
Yeah. Well, she didn't realize it was his kid.
There's two scenes where guys get drilled in the head with
like
drilling
smoked
equipment. Yeah, just basically breaks their necks or crushes their skull. But he basically ends up adopting that child, and then you know, if you're again, you're not quite paying attention, you might not know till the end when he starts calling his son a bastard in a basket, which we'll get to that later on. But
well, while we're on that topic, I thought it was kind of an interesting thing how it seemed like that was so normal. It was just like, oh well, that guy died, so now you're mine. And
yeah,
like
but
back then
in 1902, yeah,
right,
it's like
it's just wild because I don't know. Thinking back to, like you said, it's only like 120 years ago, and people are just
isn't that crazy? Like
oh,
that's 100 years ago.
Yeah, he just died in a hole, so now you're my kid. Like,
well,
what?
who? I mean, if maybe his wife, maybe when he says later on that his son, he ends up naming HW. I don't know if they ever say what it stands for.
I don't
think they ever say what it stands for. But HW. He tells everyone that his mother died in childbirth, his wife did. So I wonder if that's what actually happened to that guy. So if there was no more immediate family, who would say anything? And even if there was any other family back then, the communication was so sparse. I mean, radio and what's it called?
There's no way that mom would have ever found out, like the mother of that guy or the kid,
unless someone sent a letter or radioed or something. I mean, well, actually, I don't even know if when was it radio? I don't know what year radio was widely available.
I think
was it 1902? Was it widely available in 1902?
I think it was.
It was during World War I. I know that. At least 15 years later. I know it was, but
I mean, I'm sure.
But anyway, communication was just so difficult to get any communication with people at that time that if something like that happened, I mean, how would you really know? But yeah, I again, as the movie goes on, I mean, there's not much that's explained, and I kind of like a lot how this movie is more of a character piece centered around Paul Dano. In particular, Daniel Day-Lewis's character is Daniel Plainview, but Paul Dano's character, Eli Sunday. Paul Dano was originally cast only to play Paul Sunday, the twin brother who's barely in the movie. And the guy, I was reading a trivia fact, the guy who they originally had on set to play Eli Sunday, different actor, allegedly, this has been disputed, but there's been reports that he was very intimidated by Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't know if you guys know, Daniel Day-Lewis stays in character for an entire shoot.
Right.
He never gets out of character.
Can you imagine like being around him like that? That'd be crazy.
He'd be like, "Hey man, how are you?" And then he's just like in character. And you're like,
"Hello."
No, like seriously, like I'm trying to fucking talk to you. And he's like being all
just
weird.
Wouldn't. Those kind of guys, I think, stay in their. I mean, they're locked in. I mean, that's why Daniel Day-Lewis has won, I think, a record time, the Best Actor, like 3 or 4 times for the Oscar for Best Actor. I mean, he's just such a great actor. But so what ended up happening is Paul Dano, they ended up turning his character into twin brothers, and asked him to play Eli. He had 4 days to prep. They had been shooting for 2 weeks, I was reading, and they had to reshoot all of the scenes with Eli Sunday with Paul Dano. He was given 4 days to prep for that character. And I'm just so impressed with him. He was like 22 years old. Paul Dano.
I hated Eli in that fucking movie.
But he's such a good actor. I think that's the point.
He's just a little twat, though. Oh, my
I hate them
gosh,
both.
like,
I mean, I hate them. They're both just... They both have humanity. You can understand and empathize like their reasons for what they're doing. Like that's their whole existence. He is religion. I mean, you can take the movie overall as like Eli Sunday's like modern American religion in human form, and Daniel Plainview's like modern American capitalism, like this rise from rags to
Rockefeller.
Yeah, to create. Apparently, they based his character on 2 real life oil tycoons. That the book Oil talks about. But the book, I think they only use like the first 100 pages of the book. The rest is mostly all original story. But yeah, those two, I every time I watch this, they're just, my hair stands up on my neck a few scenes. Like the church scene obviously is incredible. There's more than one church scene. There's a couple that are like, you're like cringing or like kind of laughing but you're like
the one with the lady.
Yeah, but there's people like that, dude. There are people like that still in the South. You go down in the South, like some of those backwoods like churches, man.
Not even
like,
backwoods.
We're going to get the devil out of you. Like they do that stuff. Like they're so into it. I mean, and when he goes out, get out, and he like runs and throws there's people who do that stuff, man. It's chilling to watch because you're like, this is accurate. I mean, and then the scene when they're both in the church together and he's like beating the shit out of Daniel Plainview, smacking him, and Daniel Plainview's like laughing at him. Daniel Day-Lewis is like laughing. It was like, I'm gonna get my pipeline. He's like in the middle, he's smacking him in the face. He's like, I'm getting my pipeline. I love that moment because he knows he's just doing this simply to get that bandy guy to sell him his property. But we're kind of jumping around here a little bit, but we didn't even mention how he basically like how he comes to become this oil tycoon is, I don't know. Would you guys label him an evil character? I don't know. If I kind of
read
evil,
that he was a con artist.
He was a con artist.
He's greedy.
Greedy. Yeah. I would call him a greedy businessman.
Yeah, he's just doing whatever he can do to get to the top, to get as much money as possible, to be as successful as possible.
What were you saying, Jimmy?
I was going to say, I think as his character progressed through the movie, he started out as, kind of similar to capitalism and, entrepreneurship. And at the beginning, you view him as like, oh, he's a hard worker. He's, going to do whatever it takes to get to the top. Like, good for him. He's the good small guy. And once he got
initially,
to the top, he turned into a villain. By the end of the film, he was certainly a villain, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that is an interesting aspect, how they basically show him at first as like this small businessman, like rags to riches, like trying to like make it to the top, doing whatever he can to rise. But along the way, he ends up doing some pretty messed up things. And he basically, he's like, not a car salesman, but in a way he says whatever he has to say. Like when he meets with that whole town, when he finds out, when he goes to the Sunday ranch, that like there's oil, this whole town is like an oil field, and basically buys everyone's or I think he leases everyone's property. He's paying them all, leasing it so that he can build a pipeline and like drill on all their property.
When he meets with Standard Oil and he tell that guy at the table,
I'm gonna slit your
I'm
throat.
Gonna come in, while you're sleeping, I'm gonna slit your throat. He goes, excuse me?
He goes, what are, he's like so shocked.
It's crazy. It's crazy though, because there are people not that extreme, but there are still people like that are just like, and he's a grinder, to be totally honest. Like he works his ass off the whole film. He just gets more and more like greedy, and like you see the Standard Oil people who are obviously very successful, and I don't know if they're doing business necessarily the right way, but they're doing it in a much more sophisticated manner. And he's just kind of wild and crazy, but he's like doing what he's got to do to get the job done. He's like going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that he gets what he thinks he needs to get or deserves.
Which I love that portrayal, because again, this movie's over, takes place over 100 years ago, but I feel like if you change the time period, the clothes, modern town, you could face, you could take this template and drop it into a modern film. You really could. I that's what I love about it, is it echoes modern America. It's like the beginning of modern America. I really think it is.
It kind of echoes humanity to some extent.
I was going to say Standard Oil was like your big money families who got into oil, like those oil. And then he was just like this guy who just like went nuts and just found some oil and then just became super hungry. So it was like, cool.
Yeah, I was like super pissed because like the beginning of the movie, he's falling in holes and breaking his leg for an ounce of silver.
He does work hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting how you can have that kind of an honest, hardworking mentality change so quickly because you get some success really quickly.
Which again, I think kind of echoes, it's relevant today. I mean, you see that with people, sometimes people remain humbler to their roots when they become famous or make money or become, a tycoon or, a big power. You're going to be
stay more humble.
I'm still waiting on it, Zach. Can you become a tycoon quicker?
I'm only 28. Okay, I got plenty of time.
If that shit stick would have made it, we would have been fucking balling out here.
Along the way, though, throughout this movie, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but not really dived in. Not really have gotten into it explicitly yet. But this movie is a technical masterpiece. I know you guys don't. You don't give as much credence. You do a little bit as I do. Well, I was gonna say, when you watch movies, I know that you guys are appreciative of it, but I don't know how much you pay attention to it or not when you're watching this movie. I just think it's one of the standout things on top of the character-driven aspect of the film, and the heavy themes that echo modern America with religion and capitalism and greed. I just adore everything about this movie from a technical standpoint and production design. I mean, they went to a ranch in Texas, so it's supposed to be in California, but they basically were on a ranch where they built all those sets in one massive, wide open plain ranch. Which, I mean, it looks incredible. The town that they're in, from what I've read, they built all the buildings, all the sets. The only thing I believe that was not filmed in Texas and was not built is the mansion at the end was in Beverly Hills. It was like 100-year-old mansion that exists in Beverly Hills. They had to do some massive renovation indoors of that mansion to get to like some of the rooms to look 1927, especially the bowling alley. They renovated that whole bowling alley to make it look like 1927. But then also, the costumes, the makeup. I love how, they're always dirty, got guys with bad teeth. They're always disheveled looking. They look like they live in this, country town in the middle of nowhere. They're poor. The
oil workers always looked like they worked with oil.
Yeah. I mean, the commitment to the setting and the time period it's masterful. I mean, it's incredible. And then the cinematography, there's a lot of long shots and pan shots. I love the shot when they first get to the town, they're driving in the car and they got a great tracking shot. The whole sequence when the tower goes up in flames, always gives me chills. Badass. I mean, it is gorgeous. I don't know how they filmed that. What's that?
I'm a sucker for a good long shot. That was one of the things I was going to tip my hat to. Some of those long shot scenes are really cool.
Yeah, and that whole sequence with the flames, I mean, I'm just like, I am locked in on that sequence because you guys said you didn't like the music. I love the cascading, like the word cacophony. It's like all these different instruments they built. They build up though, and Zach, I'm sure you pay attention to it. They start with it's like drums. It's dun 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 dun, cool. And then they come in with like different percussion instruments, but they keep layering it and layering it and layering it. So by the end, it's just all these different sounds that like is representing like the fear and chaos of what's happening on the screen. And then obviously the horrible tragedy of his son having his eardrums like burst because he's right there when it explodes.
Yeah.
And goes deaf, which is super sad.
One thing I wanted to say before we get too far from the setting piece and the reality, like how realistic it was, watching like the way they built the drills and stuff, and the way they built the first scene, when the oil rig falls in on the guy and kills him in that second scene or whatever. It's so wild to look at that and realize it was only 100 years ago, and now how different that is. Like,
isn't that
where he's crazy? Drawing it on the napkin?
Right.
Yeah. I was like, holy shit. Like, they're literally just thinking of it.
Not to mention you have a 10-year-old boy just hanging out above the freaking oil drill. It's like, just peeking at it, and then it freaking explodes, and it's like, I don't know. It's just
no safety regulations.
Yeah, nothing.
OSHA would have something to say about that.
What?
OSHA would have something to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's people getting impaled. Like, don't worry.
Isn't that crazy to think about, though, that like OSHA, like none of that stuff existed?
Yeah. And I mean, oil drilling is still super dangerous, but but it's just so much more well regulated, and it's cool to see kind of where it came from. Just like nobody really knew what they were doing; they're just kind of giving it their best shot, and had these giant, wide open gears and pulley systems. And it was
the scene where they're in the bottom, well, when the guy gets impaled, but they're just filling buckets with oil. They're standing in the oil, just like bloop, bringing it up. Bloop,
but if you stop and think about it, like if you're not some like massive, what's that?
Wasn't one of the guys smoking a cigarette down there too?
Yeah.
I think it was Daniel Plainview.
The guy at the top was smoking a cigarette.
Oh yeah.
but regardless, I mean,
but it's just crazy to think about that. Yeah, that like they just didn't have the technology and the tools and the resources. But like Zach said, how quickly everything developed. I mean, again, you're seeing the beginning of the industrialization like era.
Yeah,
modern America. It's the beginning of modern America in that early, that first 2 decades of the 20th century. It's crazy.
While we're still on this topic, I think it'd be cool to rewrite this film back in like the 90s and do it as like a technology boom. And even now, like in a crypto boom. And I mean, it's all capitalism. You could create some sort of very similar story, the intricacies of everything would be different, but you still are going to have your same basis, your greed-driven individuals that are going to do anything to succeed.
I would argue, Jim, that movie was made, Wolf of Wall Street.
I was literally just about to say that. The housing one, or not Wolf of Wall Street.
The Big Short.
The Big Short.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of films that
I think the Social Network mimics it a little bit too.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, that'd be a modern rise to.
I've seen all 3 of those, so you all lose a point.
I've seen all 3 of them too. So.
Oh.
No, I think it's a timeless story. That's why I think this movie resonates with so many people, because you can take this template and apply it to modern America like those movies. I think there's a lot of great movies that take that general idea of rags to riches in America, whether modern America or early 20th century. Like it's timeless, because that's what this country was built on, was that idea that you can come here and make anything of yourself at that time, and you still can. I think it's lost its glow, its hue, its appeal. I think in 2020 and 2021 we're not.
It requires much more creativity.
Yeah,
think about this though. In 100 years, what's going to happen?
Doesn't that
like something is going to be ridiculously different, but you have no idea what it is.
Well, do you ever think about that with like your grandparents or whatever? Like, think about when your grandparents are growing up. My grandparents are young for grandparents of a person my age. They're in their 70s, and they were born in the 40s. And like, my grandma was born in a house that had dirt floors. Like, it's just weird.
That is crazy.
It's crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, as we move along, a couple other things I want to kind of discuss, and again, you guys can jump in with anything, but I was talking about the cinematography as we kind of, talked about some other things there. But one thing that I also noticed about the cinematography, in addition to some of the gorgeous, set pieces and colors and tracking shots and panning shots, is, do you guys notice that throughout the entire film, I think one scene didn't have Daniel Plainview? I think one scene. You guys notice that?
I did notice that.
The scene where Eli Sunday beats the shit out of his dad at the dinner table, I think, is the only scene that Daniel Plainview is not in. Which I think is again, it's a testament to this film being a character piece, a character study. But that one scene also kind of cues you in, and I think is kind of key to the movie really detailing these 2 guys. While it is a focus on Daniel Plainview, that it's also these 2 guys, one who's like modern America religion, leading into modern American religion, and the other one, capitalism. And I love that it's kind of like they help each other, but they don't, right? They're kind of at odds, they're fighting, and I think that's super relevant. Yeah, that's super relevant to today, because as you guys might agree with me, I think now in 2021, not nearly as many people are as religious or, even believe in God. I think there's far more agnostics and atheists than there ever was before. I think people have found that in modern times that religion is just not, it's not something they put their faith in anymore. I'm Catholic. I know James is Catholic. Zach is Christian. Kory, I think,
I'm
is agnostic. But I think most people, maybe not adults, well, we're adults, boomers, I don't know, boomers of the silent generation. I would say younger generations more and more, as we look on, you look into social media and online in the modern age of technology, that people have found solace in other things outside of religion. So I don't know, that aspect to me is probably the least relevant. But I think religion still is very powerful. While not as many people, give it credence anymore as they would have 100 years ago, it's still a very powerful worldwide. I mean, you think how big Catholicism and Christianity is.
How many people went to church still because their preacher told them that God wouldn't let them get the COVID vaccine? That was way wrong. How many people would go to church amidst the COVID pandemic because their preacher told them that God wouldn't give them COVID? Like, it still affects a lot of people. You know what I mean?
But isn't that great? Because that's exactly what Eli Sunday probably would have said 100 years ago.
Oh yeah.
God will at church will
pull this COVID vaccine out.
Get out!
You will die of COVID.
And I'll give you the cure.
What'd you say, James?
I'll spit in your mouth and give you the cure.
Yeah, right.
I'll give you the vid if you.
What is he? I love his little monologue where he was like, I will bite you until I have no teeth, and if I have no teeth, I will gum you. I will use my fists to pound you, and if he just goes on and on.
He's loony bin.
It was so cringeworthy, man. It was terrible.
He's great. I mean, he's such a good actor, and that to me is just, it's very relevant. I mean, there's people like that. Another thing I want to point out as we kind of continue through the conversation here is how this movie's edited together. Did you guys notice there's not really that many scenes? Right. The movie is really split up into like 4 distinct years, right? 1898, which is very short. It's like just an opening scene. Then it jumps pretty quickly to 1902 when he starts doing oil kind of in a small venture. And then it jumps. This is about the 15-minute mark, I think I remember, where they go to 1911. And he's standing with his son. I love that sequence. It's a long, James talking about it's a long take. The camera starts, it just is on Daniel Plainview. It's on Daniel Day-Lewis's face. And it slowly zooms out. And he's addressing a town, a potential town. It's not the event. It's not the town where the Sunday Ranch is, but it's like a potential town where he's trying to drill for oil. And that's 1911, right? And I would say, the better portion of the film is 1911, because it's not until the end in the mansion, which is only the last 30 minutes, where they go to 1927. So it is a good hour, 45 minutes that takes place in 1911. But in that time period that they're in 1911, the scene, I love how fleshed out the scenes are. Right? The scenes are long. Like when there is a sequence, it's drawn out like 10, 15 minutes. Like the whole, the scene where the fire goes up, that's a long sequence. The scene in the church is very drawn out. When he meets with Eli's family at the ranch, when they're prospecting the ranch, that's a very long, fleshed out sequence. I love how they edit this film, the scenes, how they're put together, and how this film is structured. They allow the scenes and the characters to breathe. And you spend time. And again, James maybe found it boring. Maybe Maddie found it boring. But I love it because Zach, I think, feels the same way. I love spending time in this time capsule, this era we're so far removed from, but really, like we said, is not that out of mind. Because you just said your grandparents, my grandparents were born in the late 1920s and 1930s. Mine were a little bit older. It's they were around in this time. So you know what I mean? It's a long time ago, but there's people who were alive then, that are alive now.
Only 2 or 3 generations ago, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. And I just love that, spending time in this. Moving on here, one of the next things I kind of want to talk to you guys about, before we get kind of to the end, because I do want to talk about the end of the movie. What were some of your favorite either scenes or lines of dialogue? I kind of wrote down. I have several that I love in this movie. Do you guys have any favorite sequences or lines of dialogue? There's so many memorable, great one-liners in this movie. They usually come from Daniel Day-Lewis.
My favorite line, and you kind of were talking about getting to the end of it, but my favorite line is the last line. I'm finished.
That's a great final line.
That's a great line. Yeah.
And I love it because you can interpret it more than one way.
Right.
And I've read people have written I've read people's essays on how they interpret the ending, because it's very ambiguous by what he means by that. I'm finished, I'm going to prison, my life is over, I fucked up, I murdered someone in cold blood. I murdered my my son-in-law.
Yeah.
Technically, because We'll get to the ending a little bit.
Yeah.
Technically, going into it, it's his adoptive son who marries Eli's sister. So it's technically like his.
I think it's more of like he's done. Like he has no more ties other than his son and daughter-in-law.
Yeah,
like
his life is. His life is over
good.
in like a figurative sense. Like
he's good now. Like he doesn't have to worry about this ridiculous human that's been pestering him.
Or another way you can interpret it is I'm finished. I'm accomplished. I've done everything I want to do. I just eliminated my nemesis. Yeah. This guy that I hate, that I can't stand him. I've ended him. Like I think there's at least those three ways you can turn. It's great.
I interpret it. I didn't think he was done with that nasty ass steak he was eating on.
that's literally what he meant. I think when he was talking to his butler, it was like, "I'm finished," but it was so.
That's another way. That's a fourth way. I'm finished eating. Like you can clear my plate. This murder is like, it's whatever. I've killed people before.
He seems like that kind of person, right? Like he killed a guy before just because.
We didn't even talk about
he
that. He
shot. I was gonna just say that. That was my favorite scene.
That was a good.
We didn't even mention.
Him in the head.
We didn't even mention. There's a whole sequence right after his son loses his hearing, and he's trying to figure out what to do with him. That this guy, he comes home one day and this guy just shows up, and it's the actor who played Benny in The Mummy. Do you guys remember?
And he looks exactly like him.
Yeah,
like they look identical.
And he says he's his brother. He goes, "I'm your half brother. I'm your brother from another mother."
I thought that was.
We have the same father. I love that line. I love it. Makes me laugh every time. And he says it so deadpan. He's like, "I'm your brother from another mother. We share the same father." I love that line. Yeah. But they end up becoming like good friends. There's like a this is again another sequence that's fleshed out. There's like 15 minutes of the movie dedicated to like them becoming not maybe quite partners, but becoming friends. And then he starts saying weird things like that don't match up. That like Daniel Plainview notices he's saying things that don't really make sense in the context of their family. He starts asking him questions like, "Do you know about this or this?" And he like gives him half answers or doesn't answer. And then one night when they're at they're I think they're going out, something to do with oil again, obviously, but they're at like a fire out in the middle of the woods, and
they were staking out their pipeline.
Okay, that's what it was. And he basically wakes him up with a gun in his face and asks him a question. And then when he confesses the whole story, that
he just goes, "Who are you?"
Yeah. Well, because you got the scene right before that, before they went into the brothel or whatever. Yeah. He said something about get all liquored up and go to the peach tree dance or something like that.
And he just kept ignoring him. He just
and Daniel Day-Lewis was like, "You should be responding to this a different way." And
I think the intention was that like growing up wherever they were from, that must have been something that was a big deal, and he didn't even acknowledge it. Right. Yeah, and that's why it was like, why aren't you?
He just smokes him in the head, though.
Just shoots him
like
right
he
in
just,
the head.
And then the guy just dies, and they just show it. It was like, holy
and then
shit.
he just dumps his body and just digs a hole and dumps his body in it. And that's one of the few moments of humanity you see from Daniel Plainview, because then he cries. He's like getting drunk after he does it, and he cries, and he's like all upset. But I don't think he's upset or remorseful for murdering him.
Mm-mm.
I think he's upset that he never met his half brother. That he found out he had a half brother that died that he never met, and he's upset that it was like a false relationship, that he really wanted to have a family member that was blood, because at this point we don't know it yet. We're gonna get to the ending a little bit. We don't know it yet that this isn't his real son.
Yeah, we did. You kind of do from the beginning if you're paying attention.
Yeah, I knew. I was gonna say I knew from the beginning.
I thought it was weird. I didn't pick it up right away, but I wasn't paying.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, I remember the first time I saw this, I didn't realize it. I don't know when I first watched how well I paid attention to that beginning, but I remember the ending. I was like, "Oh shit, that's not his son." And then when I watched it the second time, I remember then going, "Oh," because that other guy who died was holding the baby. So to me,
the conversation real quick, because I'm on the same page with you, Vince. When I watched it, I was having trouble keeping track of the characters in the beginning because there wasn't a lot of dialogue, so it was kind of hard to tell who was who. And there was like an oil worker; they were all dirty.
Yep.
Well, for about 3/4 of the movie, for some reason in the back of my mind, I thought Eli and Paul were the same person because the characters look so similar that
it's the same actor.
I thought Eli was just going by a different name. It's like when they first get to Sunday Ranch and he's like, "Hi, I'm Eli." And I'm like, wait, no, that's Paul. Maybe he's just going by a different name because he gave him like a fake name when he gave him information. And I was like, that's weird.
Well, I don't think they ever actually come out, and again, going back to very little exposition, not much explaining. I don't think they ever say the word twins.
No, they don't.
I don't think they ever do. I think
so was that Paul the whole time?
No, it's Eli.
No.
They're twin brothers.
Okay. You just screwed me up. I was like, what?
They talk about Paul, even though Paul never shows back up again. They talk about him later in the movie. They reference him. And
that last scene, he was like, your brother Paul sold you out, and like he's the reason.
He gave him a bunch of money. Yeah, he gave him a bunch of money. But I think the one hint is when Eli introduces himself as Eli, the look on Daniel's face.
Yeah,
he's very confused. He's like, Eli.
I caught that, and I was like, oh wait.
And I think he remembers when he met Paul that Paul said he had a brother named Eli, and he puts together and said, oh, they're twins. But again, I like that because Paul Thomas Anderson, the writer director, like, you really have to pay attention. Like, he doesn't just explain things to you. And I just like that in my movies. I like, movies that I watch. I enjoy that. So I appreciate that they do that.
We were discussing lines and dialogue and favorite lines.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to get back to there are a couple lines I really like. The scene where they baptize Daniel Plainview was fantastic.
Love that scene.
Where you can kind of tell, like, he's getting annoyed with Eli, and so he just, blurts out everything, and then at some point he's just kind of like, okay,
I want the blood. Give me the blood.
Give me the
blood. Give me the blood.
I've abandoned my son. That whole thing. I thought that was good and
I've abandoned my child. I love that.
Because for a minute I felt like he was like buying into it and was being overtaken by the emotion of the moment, and then it's like,
I think the I've abandoned my child struck a chord with him because he gives him a death glare.
Yeah.
It's great acting. He just glares at him when he tells him to say that.
But there's so many lines in this movie that were so like just nasty and like mean and like vile to say. And one of the lines in the last scene when he's talking to Eli and he's talking about his brother Paul and how his brother Paul was the smart one, and talking about how Eli, he was just the afterbirth.
You're an afterbirth that slithered out.
Yeah, well, Paul was suckling at your mom's breast. You were given to one of the sows in your father's herd. Like, it was just like, oh, man.
It's cruel. I mean, he just breaks him down. And then when he makes him renounce his religion, and then he makes him yell it louder and louder and louder, then he goes, that oil's gone.
Yeah.
As he's eating.
Drink your milkshake.
But right before, I love that line too, but right before that line, it's such great acting. Daniel Day-Lewis is just such a great actor. He's just sitting there and he is just ridiculing him, making him continuously louder and louder renounce his religion. And then casually he starts eating again and goes, that oil's gone, or that's tapped, or whatever he says. Right. It's drainage. Such a great moment. And Eli's just shocked. And he goes, drainage. He goes, way over here. I drink your milkshake. I love that. That line is so great. Did you know that Paul Thomas Anderson, I love reading trivia about this movie. He found that line. He did a ton of research. In addition to reading the book, he looked up like everything about like oil from this time period. And he found some politician did in like the 1920s, gave some speech about oil and used the word milkshake to describe drainage.
Wait, milkshake or milkshake?
Jesus Christ.
Milkshake.
Milkshake.
I drink your milkshake.
R.I.P.
I would have liked the movie if it said that.
Coach Milk just was like, hey, what's going on, everybody? Somebody call Milk out here?
Want to put some beats on?
So before let's talk about the ending a little bit more, but before we really talk a little bit more about the ending, did you guys, I know Zach kind of talked, Kory or Jimmy, do you guys have any other like scenes that we skipped over, or like lines that you really liked?
No, I touched on mine.
Yeah, I'll say obviously I don't know if we're going to touch on it more, but the scene where the rig catches on fire, I thought one of the lines that stuck with me is after they've kind of like contained it to some sense and they're just looking at it, and I don't know who it was, but like one of his secondhand man comes up and he's like, is your son okay?
Yes.
And he's like, no, and he's just like, he doesn't even look away.
He goes, it's a great line of dialogue because he goes, no, he is not.
Yeah. And he's just like he doesn't even look away. He's just looking entranced at the fire.
And I love that in terms of the character study, because it shows you how gone he is at that point. That he does not even care. Like his sole focus is the fire. And then he looks, and then he's like, is it the same moment when he goes, "Why do you look so gloomy?" He goes, "There's a whole ocean of oil under here."
Yeah.
Like, but yeah,
I think that's why everybody
moment.
was cheering. That's why everybody was cheering, and like that's why that moment I think hit him weird, because it was a moment of like they just hit the jackpot.
Like they know
because they hadn't hit oil yet, and that was like what they needed to hit right there.
Well, I think they were getting oil, but that gas release, I think, is like it's indication that like there's a lot of pressure. There's a ton of oil down there. Yeah. Like you really opened it up. I love how they stop the fire too. Going back to that sequence, how they that's
actually how they do it. Like that was back how they did it, because the explosion takes all the oxygen out of the proximity.
Yeah.
So no oxygen, no fire. So that's actually how they did it.
It's pretty wild to watch. I thought it was it's just such a great sequence. Everything about that.
Fire with fire.
Going back to his son, but let's go to the ending now. If you guys want to talk about anything else, you can interject. Let me know. But going back, what's that?
Talk about that scene. They only built one derrick. They only built one oil rig, so they had one shot.
Oh, did they really?
They only had one shot, because after watching this movie, I wanted to like it, and I just couldn't get myself into it. So I watched some YouTube videos on like.
Oh, did you?
And that was one of the things I found, is they had one rig, and they had one shot at doing it. So that's why if you watch that scene again, and I thought this was pretty cool, because I enjoyed that scene a lot, and acting, but just in total, I didn't like it. The scene itself, like you can kind of notice how it's cut together. It feels a little discombobulated because it's like day and then night, and it's cut weird. It's because they didn't have, because of the winds that day, and they couldn't get, because the rig dried out so much and was so it was so dry,
like basically tinder.
They couldn't put it out because they wanted to extinguish the rig and then wait for the night, but they had to keep it burning, and at some point the rig was going to fall over, so they had to do all the shoots like on the fly. They had to just like keep rolling and run, like they're just running and gunning and shooting.
Yeah, because when it first goes up, the sun is still up when it first goes up in flames.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and the fire basically burns all night.
Yeah, so that I thought that was really cool. But I'll digress and we can continue on.
While you're at that point, I like the camera work there too, because I don't know if you guys remember, the camera gets like a weird
like
red
fisheye.
Yeah,
it's like
it gets, and I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but it was so cool because it gets like that, I don't know, fuzz on the
focus. It's like really focused. Yeah. Cool. And I think that it's very intentional. I think it's part of it could be interpreted as like tunnel vision for Daniel Plainview, because a lot of the movie really is from his perspective, from his character, and like that's what he's focused on. Like even his son, who has just gone deaf, went through a traumatic experience. He leaves him in the room. You can tell the kid can't hear. He says more than once, "I can't hear my voice. I can't hear my voice," and he still leaves his son. And if you guys want to interject, let me know. But then I kind of want to transition to Zach brought up how cruel he is. How about what he says to his son?
Yeah.
Oh my! Every time my stomach.
How about when he leaves him on the train?
Yeah, that was awesome.
I was like, he's going to talk to the conductor, and I was like, oh shit, no, he's gone.
And you can see him in the background screaming and kicking and yelling. He just literally doesn't look back at him, just walks away. And then his son smacks the shit out of him when he comes back later on. But at the end of the movie, it's 16 years later. His son is now like 25, because that kid is born in 1902. So he's like about 24, 25 in 1927. He is married Mary Sunday. The 1927 sequence begins with him marrying Paul and Eli's sister Mary, and he is now completely fluent in American Sign Language. Fun fact: that actor is deaf and is fluent in American Sign Language. That actor, I don't know if you guys. Fact. I don't know, maybe not so fun, but I don't know if you guys like the TV show Fargo, but that actor plays a significant role as a deaf character in Fargo, and he's really great in that too in the TV show. But his son comes into his office, and you can tell Daniel is like now just a piece of shit. I mean, he's drunk. He looks like shit. It's almost like a regression back to the beginning. He looks like he hasn't shaved. He hasn't showered. He's just sitting there drunk. Right before that, there's a scene of him in the hallway shooting stuff in a room down the hall. There's just bullet holes drilled all in the walls. He's just a drunk, rich piece of shit. And he's like in his office, and his son comes in and like informs him using his interpreter. Because his dad is such a piece of shit, he never took a chance to learn sign language. He doesn't care to learn sign language. So his son uses an interpreter with his dad and basically tells him that he's going to Mexico to start his own business. And what he says to him is just like, every time I watch this movie, it's just like, it makes me feel awful. He basically like tells him he's not his son. And at first, again, the first time I watched this movie, I didn't know it was literal. I didn't know he literally wasn't his son. But here's the thing. Any human being, good, decent human being who adopts the child considers that child their son. If they raise them from the time they were an infant, it's their son, right? They raised him. But he is like, when you realize that he is, not only is he not literally his blood son, but he is basically like telling him, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. You're not my blood. And then the great line of dialogue, which is just so chilling and disgusting, is he's like, you're a bastard. Bastard in a basket. And he just keeps screaming at him, but it's like, he can't hear you. He's just screaming, bastard in a basket. Bastard in a basket, as he's walking down the hallway. That scene is so sad. And then his son, the last thing he says to him is, I'm glad I don't have any of you in me. And then he just walks out. It's such a sad scene. And you just feel for him. But it also just shows you like, it's such a great ending. And then the next sequence with Eli Sunday, everything comes full circle. Cause like Jim said at the beginning, you see this rags to riches, this guy who works so hard for everything he wants. He has everything he wants, but at the same time, he has nothing. He's all alone. He has no wife. He has no family. He has no friends. And he's a murderer, right? He's a greedy, rich murderer.
A shitload of people.
He just doesn't care. And then that final sequence, he's down in the bowling alley, pissed drunk, asleep. Could you imagine sleeping on the gutter of a bowling alley? Like he's in his head. Every time I watch the scene, I'm like, that had to have been so uncomfortable. I'm sure Day-Lewis was probably only laying there for like a few seconds before the shot started, but who knows how many times they filmed the scene. I don't know. But he's like laying on the gutter of the bowling alley, and his butler comes in, has to wake him up. And his butler can't wake him up, so Eli screams in his face. It's like, Daniel, your house is on fire, right? And then he finally wakes up. And that entire final, it's like the final that whole sequence is like 15 minutes. Again, fleshed out scenes that are so great. It's like 15 minutes. And it's just basically Eli telling him that now he's a minister on radio. He's like kind of a famous, he's kind of also parallels Daniel, right? Like he's a rags to riches story too. Small town minister. Now he's kind of like, who's that douchebag minister in Texas?
Joel Osteen?
Yeah, he's like a 100-year ago version of that. He's like, now he's on the radio. He's wearing a huge cross necklace. And he's basically kind of like Daniel, but in religion instead of oil. And comes back and tells him, I want my money, because they agreed on, was it $10,000? And Daniel, you find out Daniel never gave them that money that he agreed on for basically getting their property, getting the Sunday Ranch where it all started. And he wants interest. And then he tries to use the Bandy property as bartering. That Bandy guy ends up dying. And he tells him he'll sell him that property. And he basically then tries to blackmail him, says, I will buy it from you if you renounce your religion. Right. And he tells him what does he say? God is I am a false prophet. God is a superstition. That's another chill. It's such a, like, what an awful
line. Yeah.
It's such great dialogue, such great writing, but it's so awful. Like, what a
terrible,
horrible thing to make him say. And he like says it very insincere because obviously he doesn't mean it. But he just like it echoes and I love this scene because it parallels the church scene earlier in the film where Eli, the roles are reversed and Eli is making him say all these things that he doesn't mean. And then now at the end, we have Daniel making Eli say all these things he doesn't mean, but he breaks him down to the point. On the flip side, what Eli was making Daniel say, while it was harsh, it was all in good intent. What Daniel is making Eli say is all just, he's getting revenge.
Be an asshole.
Yes, he's trying to get revenge because he hates him. He hates Eli. Can't stand him. And he's just making him renounce his religion to the point where he's almost in tears. And then he goes back to eating a steak and goes, that oil's gone. And then it goes into what we already talked about, the drainage, I drink your milkshake. I love it when he goes, if I have a milkshake, and if you have a milkshake, my straw is way over here, and I take my straw way over here, I drink your milkshake.
You are him.
It's such great acting. I love Daniel Day-Lewis. And then, obviously, we haven't said it yet, then he beats him to death with a fucking bowling pin, chases him around, and beats him to death, bludgeons his head in on the floor. Jesus. And that goes back. We kind of already talked about what's that?
Finished.
He could have gotten out of there. He should have. I don't understand why he ran down the alley. If you're in threat, why don't you run out the way you came in?
Well, remember that sequence begins with Daniel at the end of the lane, and Eli is towards, and he starts whipping bowling balls at him. So he's like running away from the bowling balls, and he kind of pins him in that back corner, and then he's kind of like chasing him around with the pins. And then I think he trips and falls.
I get what Jimmy's saying, though. If you can't outrun a drunk guy, maybe you deserve to be in that situation.
Yeah.
People also don't realize that they oil bowling alleys.
Yeah.
So, those lanes were probably
in 1927?
Shit.
Do they?
I bet you they still did.
There was some.
Not maybe to that extent. Yeah.
Whether you want to argue how he could have gotten away, I think the point, him murdering him is the point. Like, that's the point. And then we already talked about the fine. After he beats him to death, the camera cuts to the butler coming down the stairs, like responding to the commotion. And Daniel just says, I'm finished. And then the music, Zach, going back to the music, they come back in. It's not Johnny Greenwood's music. It's a classical piece, a very uplifting. Is it Brahms? I looked it up. I can't remember what composer it is. Very famous classical piece of music starts. And it's the same piece of music that's played early in the film, I believe. I can't remember what sequence, but it's reincorporation because that piece was played early in the film too. But it is significant them playing it again because I think it was played early in the film when things are going really well for him, if I remember correctly. And it's like now it's playing again to end the film. And it's like things are going well for him, but are they really? Like, he has nobody. He's a murderer. Like, he's just this drunk piece of shit just up in his mansion, killing people, shooting things, and falling asleep on bowling alleys in his bowling alley. But man, I love this movie. Final thoughts or ratings? Want to give ratings and final thoughts, Kory?
Good movie, really deep. I think it's one of those ones you could probably watch 2 or 3 times and still not really get like the whole story. I'll give it a 8.2.
Okay, IGN with your decimal place.
8.26.
Nice. Just round up.
8.2.
You want to go first, or you want me to go?
Sure, I'll go. Well, it's definitely not a movie that I would choose to watch 100% of the time. It was a very good
It is
movie.
an investment.
It's an investment, and I feel like you have to be like willing to, I guess, invest your time and your energy.
You got to be in the right
it.
mood too.
Right, like if I had, I'm not going to come home and watch it after a long day of work. You know what I mean? Like, it's not an easy watch, but it is very, very good, and I really like the acting in it. Specifically, I like the music. I was intrigued by how they were able to make you feel how the characters maybe felt. I'd probably give it like, I don't know, 8.5 or so out of 10, out of 11, 8.5 out of 11.
Wow.
11-point scale. James.
Yeah. So as I made myself clear at the beginning, I didn't enjoy the movie. I do want to say,
which is fair. I think it's fair. I mean,
yeah,
I don't think this
like
movie's for everybody.
It's unique.
Pick pieces out that the acting in it was phenomenal. The cinematography was great. The score was awesome. So, I enjoyed a lot of pieces of it, but I couldn't get my mind over the story itself. It didn't hold me, and it wasn't interesting. I get the fact and the draws between like, what it should be. I didn't find it interesting, and maybe I wasn't in the mindset to watch that. And I don't know, maybe if I was, looking to watch something kind of, I don't know, more informative and deep, I would have liked it. But yeah, I struggled with it. I didn't enjoy it. So for that, I'm out. I'll give it a Shark Tank rating. I'll go
a Shark Tank.
3.
I was so confused what you were saying. I'm out.
For those reasons, I'm out. I will never watch the movie again.
Wow,
that's fair. That's fair.
What did Ken's think of it, or just you not watch it with you?
I'm sure my boss isn't around. I watched it during work.
Oh,
It was a slow day.
Slow day. Nice.
Slow day.
Good movie to watch during work, though.
Took up 2.5 hours.
Yeah. I checked my email maybe twice. No emails. It was a good day.
After I go, I want to see what you guys, of the 3 that we watched, see what your favorite was of the 3. I love this movie. I think it's a 10 out of 10. I think everything it does is perfect. I think it's a masterclass in every category of filmmaking. I completely understand it not being a movie for everybody. I completely understand people just not liking it. I would be, if like James, I appreciate that James can say that there's things that are good about it, because I think even if you don't like this movie, it's not for you. I don't know how you couldn't say like the acting is incredible.
Yeah,
like
acting's phenomenal.
Like the technical aspects are phenomenal. Like the commitment to the time period is great. But if it's a story, it's just a story and a general movie that's not for you, I completely understand, because it is a certain type of movie. It's, as much as I love this movie and it's one of my favorite movies, and I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. I really do. I think it can go up there with The Godfather and Casablanca and Vertigo and Citizen Kane and like the greatest movies ever made. To me, you could put it.
Yeah, I've seen Godfather.
You could put it up with the 100 greatest movies ever made, no problem. I really do think that. But again, I think it's one you got to be in a certain mood for. Even though I love this movie, it's not a movie I would sit down and be like, oh, I'm going to watch this again next week. Like, it's a 2.5 hour epic that's like it's very challenging. I mean, you got to really be into what they're going for, and you got to be ready for a character study and theme heavy movie, almost no exposition, and be more into a period piece. Kory, of the 3, what was your favorite? Babel, Children of Men, There Will Be Blood. What was your favorite of the 3 movies we watched?
I'm going to go Children of Men, then Babel, Children of Men, then There Will Be Blood, then Babel.
James.
I repeat that, reciprocate Kory's rating. And
nice.
Maybe it's because I'm a simpleton, but like what I enjoyed about Children of Men is that like there was a story along with like the depth of what the film was trying to tell you. Like there was action and like
Children of Men isn't much of a character study
where it's like
there's more happening. Babel. There's more going on.
Yeah, and I think what I didn't like about it, and maybe I'm finding something about myself, is that I don't like character study movies where I don't like the sole focus on. So at least for
because really
one focus, and then with Babel there was a focus of 4, and it's just the character development where there's not really necessarily a plot to it, where it's like this is what they're trying to achieve, and obviously with There Will Be Blood, he's trying to achieve wealth, but that's it. And it's kind of like, well, when I watch a movie, I want to see, all right, they need to achieve this for this to happen, and they're gonna have to go through all these hoops to jump through. So maybe that's what I'm finding that I like in movies and I don't like, and
I love
trying new things is all about.
Yeah, I love.
Like to have the point. The movie needs a point.
There Will Be Blood has it does have a point, but it's more about the themes and symbolism, and the character study and kind of that time in America. It's a period piece, but there's not really a lot that happens, right? In terms of a story, it's very simple, right? Whereas Children of Men, there's characters, but when we talked about that discussion, they were more there to kind of drive the plot along. That movie's more about the ideas, the big ideas, and kind of what's happening in terms of the science fiction aspect of the movie. And then Babel again is like, it's all over the place because it's basically, all these different characters tied together through a gun, basically. Zach, how about you, man?
So I'll start with a disclaimer that I did watch Children of Men on my iPhone on an airplane. So that probably...
Which I gave you shit for last time.
Well, I'm sorry. It just happened that way. I was busy.
Hey, come over here and we'll watch it on the big screen with surround sound.
You never invite me over, so I don't know what to say. No, I think that deserves another watch for me, but I still think my order would go, There Would Be Blood, Babel, and then Children of Men. Not to say Children of Men was a bad movie.
Babel second?
I'm kind of the opposite of James, where I enjoy the character studies and and I guess I have to be in the right mood for it, right? Like I'm not necessarily going to want to watch a character study all the time. Sometimes I just want to watch an easy to watch movie, but
sometimes you just want to watch Dumb and Dumber, right?
Hell yeah, hell yeah. No, but I do truly like. I'm impressed by the talent of good actors and by being able to tell a story without just saying words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I like that. I did like Babel quite a bit. I thought it gave unique perspective to, the world outside of what I know. So,
Babel's a really different movie too. It's very different. There's a lot of period piece movies. There's a lot of science fiction movies, but Babel is very unique.
I also really like
all three movies were completely different.
Yeah. They're very different.
I also like when movies have a bunch of different storylines that are apart and then they all come together at the end.
Yeah.
That satisfies the OCD in my brain. So
one unifying event or item that ties everyone
together.
So
you love Toy Story.
Hell yeah.
Or Endgame.
Yep.
Yeah,
so I think we all had... No, I think my rank is the same as Kory. Kory, did you say There Will Be Blood, Children of Men, Babel?
Children of Men, There Will Be Blood.
Oh, Babel. I think we all had a different ranking because then I'm There Will Be Blood, Children of Men, Babel. So
Jimmy reciprocated mine.
Although I still would say Babel is not a classic.
No.
And I'd say Children of Men is more of a classic than Babel.
I would agree. Yeah, Babel I would not see Babel probably come up on lists of greatest films or even lists of greatest films from the 21st century. There Will Be Blood shows up 14 years later, shows up on lists of greatest films of all time. Children of Men comes up on a lot of 21st century great lists. I don't know if Children of Men, some people maybe have it on greatest films of all time, but Children of Men usually comes up in greatest films like the 21st century. But I would argue, that There Will Be Blood and Children of Men, There Will Be Blood, absolutely classic. Children of Men, modern classic, maybe will stand the test of time. Babel's a really good movie and I really enjoy it, but I don't think it's a classic. I don't think it will be, but well, all right, guys. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me. If you were listening, thanks for listening along. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully you watched There Will Be Blood. Otherwise, you just had the entire film spoiled for you. It is streaming on Netflix, so you can watch it on Netflix. If you haven't watched it yet, I would recommend checking it out if you didn't watch it. It's an incredible movie, but like James said, one you got to be in the right mood for, right headspace, and you gotta be ready for 2.5 hours of commitment because it is a long one. It's an epic. It's a historical epic period drama. Hopefully I can get these guys back together soon. I would like to do another round of the game, maybe next month sometime, maybe in 3 or 4 weeks. I'd like to do classics we're embarrassed we haven't seen, round 2 with these guys.
Animated movies only.
Well, I was going to set a requirement. I was going to eliminate movies past 1999. You cannot do movies past 1999. And I was going to kind of adjust the scoring a little bit to make it a little bit more tricky, but also to avoid try and get some older movies. Like we could watch some older movies that we haven't seen before from maybe the 70s, 80s, or 90s. But so stay tuned for that. That'll be coming at some point soon. I got some other things in the works. I'm hoping I got some potentially special guests to talk about the new Space Jam movie coming out soon here.
You got LeBron James.
I got LeBron James. He is coming on. We're going to talk about his latest role ruining Michael Jordan's legacy.
Wow. Or did you get Michael Jordan?
I got them both.
Kobe Bryant?
I'm going to pit them.
R.I.P.
Wow, that you got real dark real quick there. But stay tuned. We'll have some more good stuff very soon. Zac, James, Kory, thanks for joining me. Appreciate having you guys here. I'm Vince, Film Nerd Podcast. Classics we're embarrassed we haven't seen. We'll see you next time. Go watch some movies.